Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Preservation Resource Center's class on do-it-yourself home inspection for the exterior of your home. I'm Serena Mohan. I am the Director of Public Programming and Events at the Preservation Resource Center, and I'm really happy to have everyone here. This is sort of a back by popular demand class. We had a lot of interest from the community in doing this with Amelia Yates, who is an incredible expert. She's not only a licensed home inspector who works with Axelrad and Associates Home Inspections, she's also a member of the PRC team and manages our Revival Grants program. So in addition to being a licensed home inspector, she is a specialist in historic homes and doing repairs on them and making sure that they're inspected and that you can identify problems early for preventative maintenance. So I just want to take a moment to thank our members who are here. I see a number of you in the Zoom class. And for those of you on Facebook, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have been able to do regularly scheduled free live online programs throughout this time when we're all at home because of our members. You guys make this possible, so thank you. And if you are not yet a member, please consider joining the PRC. Your gift to us, your membership, is really what keeps us alive and keeps us doing these classes and keeps us being there, able to support you guys in loving your historic homes and your old buildings. We also have incredible merchandise for sale. Some of you may have seen, we got a few new t-shirts in this month. They're really, really cool. Please check them out at prcno.org. Buy a t-shirt. You can wear it on all your daily walks. And we would love, love, love the support. It means the world to us. So thank you to those of you who have been supporting us. And thank you to those of you who have been tuning into these regularly. It also means the world to us that you care that much about your historic buildings and our city's historic buildings to really be engaging and learning about this stuff as much as possible. So thank you also for caring about our amazing historic built environment in New Orleans. Just a quick order of business for those of you that are attending in Zoom. You're correct that you have you're not on video and you are muted, but we still want this to be a conversation. So if you have any questions for Amelia throughout the process and throughout this talk, please ask them in the Q&A portal on your screen. If you put them in Q&A, I'll be monitoring all those questions. If I know she's going to get to a topic a little bit later, I might hold it. So don't be alarmed if we don't get to it right away. And so I will be reading those questions and reading them out to Amelia as she's doing the inspection and showing you guys things. But please do ask questions. We want to be able to be as much of a resource as possible. So if you have questions about things and want to dive deeper, please ask. I will also let you know that Amelia is doing this as a home inspection. This is to identify issues that are there. We can talk a little bit about how you fix them, but we do have an amazing class lined up for next Wednesday that should take this conversation a little bit deeper, particularly with regard to your building envelope and some of the exterior cladding that Amelia is going to talk about, where you do see repairs that need to be made that you might identify as a result of some of the techniques and tools that Amelia is going to show you today. Our class next Wednesday with Bill Robinson of Train to Build is going to give us a really good opportunity to dive a little deeper into the best practices in how you make the fixes to your building to deal with moisture management in particular. So if you have questions about those topics, please do ask them, but know that there's sort of a follow-up to this that's going to dive deeper into the fixes for those problems next week. Same time, same place. So next Wednesday, May 6th, 2 p.m. on Zoom. You can register online after this class if you would like to learn more. So without holding us up anymore, Amelia, we're ready for you. And when you're ready to do the roofing section, just let me know and I've got the photos for you.
Okay. I guess let's just start with that, if that's okay. I took some photos this past week of just some crummy roof situations that I just thought would be good examples for you guys. So she's going to post those photos or show them in a slide, and I'm just going to touch on each one. And then I'm going to talk about the roof that I'm next to as well. All right. So this first photo, one of the reasons I took the photo was you can see there is no overhang at all on this roof. And I'm not sure if you can zoom in or not, but pretty much that's a huge it's not a huge issue, but it's something to be concerned with. Most houses have overhangs, and especially with the kind of rains we get here, you want to have more of an overhang than that. There's really nothing to prevent the water from dripping right down that wall. And you can see at the very edge of the roof line, there's a little piece of metal that's right underneath the shingles. That will help a bit with preventing water from getting into the wall, and it will prevent water from running up underneath the shingles. But as you can see, that little piece of siding right in the middle is loose. And so as soon as that piece of siding comes loose, there's nothing to prevent water from getting in it. So this is a situation where it is what it is. I'm not sure what they can do about it right this second, unless they consult a contractor and really go into depth about how to create an overhang. So being aware of it and making sure everything right along that edge is really sealed tight is important. So that's not a preferred arrangement. So if you have that, just be conscious that your house and your wall cladding might be more susceptible to rain than other houses with overhangs. Do we have any more photos? This one, same thing. We can skip over that one, but similar situation. Oh, one more thing I'm going to talk about. Go ahead. Sorry. Can you go back? One thing I'll talk about with this photo, because it's a good example, but this isn't roof related, but if you can see on that siding, you have a lot of joints that are you see the joints, how they run straight down the wall. You really want to overlap them separately. So you don't want to have two butt joints on top of each other, because that's more ways for water to get in the wall as well. So really when you put your siding in, whether it be wood or in this case, I think this was vinyl or metal, you want to stagger the seams rather than have them right on top of each other. So make sure if you do that, stagger the seams. If you have contractor come out, make sure they stagger the seams. That's it for that one, I think. You can skip over to that one. It's kind of far away. All right, this is a good one. So this was a sunny day, so you're really able to see the granule loss on this roof. So this is an architectural asphalt roof. You can see that the shingles look very staggered and they have different sizes and chunks. That's the easy indicator that it's architectural asphalt. So that's a higher quality shingle, and that will last about 25 years in our climate if you take care of it. In this case, you can kind of see right along the edges of each shingle, they're kind of shiny and glimmering. That's granule loss. So that's when the granules have fallen off of the shingles and you're starting to see the fiberglass come through. So that indicates that the roof is getting older. It doesn't mean it's totally shot, but it's something to be aware of, and you're going to have to do increased maintenance on it every year or so. So yeah, granule loss is a huge indicator of age. You can go to the next one. Here's another, same thing. You can see the fiberglass coming right through it. So that's granule loss, but also that looks kind of more like damage, like what we would call mechanical damage. So maybe a tree branch was rubbing up against it and then it just wore that area especially bad. But that's a good view, so you can see exactly what's underneath those granules. So as soon as you start to see a lot of that, you know that your roof is getting really old. You can go to the next one. Okay, here is, and it's kind of hard to see, but you know, we all have, not all, but a lot of us have old chimneys that go up through the roof. And most of our our fireplaces are not active anymore. We don't use them in New Orleans. Mostly they're capped. In this situation, you can see that there's a lot of mortar deterioration in between the bricks. So even though it's not active, doesn't mean it can't cause a problem in your house, because it's still going through the roof. So a lot of times when people redo their roofs, they'll just cut the whole chimney off and put the roof over it, so you don't have any openings. If you don't have that situation and you have that going through your roof, you still have to maintain that area. So, you know, as mortar deteriorates in between the bricks, it becomes more susceptible to water. So as soon as that mortar deteriorates, water is going to be finding its way in. So making sure the mortar is, properly pointed, making sure it's capped from the top, because if you're not using it, you don't need that open, because that's more area for water to get in. And then the flashing around the base of it, right where it enters the roof, you can see that it's rusting a lot, and you can see kind of white caulk on it. So every time I see white caulk or black tar, that tells me that somebody has been patching it over time, and maybe it needs to just be repaired properly. So any sort of caulking or little patches here and there, it's kind of more DIY work, or it maybe has been patched over and over again, which is an indicator of just, it might be a problem area. So you really need to make sure it's flashed properly. As soon as you start seeing rust, definitely keep an eye on it. You don't want that to rust through. And chimneys going through the roof, even if they're not active, it's a penetration through your roof. So you have to maintain it just like every other vent that goes through your roof. Okay, that's it for that one. And here you can see a brick has fallen from the chimney, and that's dangerous. High winds, you don't want your bricks that loose. So that tells me the mortar was so deteriorated that some of the bricks are coming loose. You can also see that gutter is really bent, and you really want to make sure your gutters are in proper condition. And then the other thing with this photo is you can see that there's a ton of, you see all that stuff in the gutter? Those are actually granules coming from the roof itself. So if you go to the next photo, I think it's a close-up of my hand holding it. Oh, no. Okay, so here's another shot of the other chimney. So clearly this house needs some repairs to their chimneys. So again, you probably get a lot of water coming in there, and you can see a lot of rust along the flashing. Next one. There we go. So that's, related to the photo a few minutes ago. Those are all granules that are coming off of the roof material. So I see that all the time in gutters. They get clogged up with that. So one, if you see that, you're having a ton of granule loss. And two, you shouldn't have that many granules in your gutters, because now you're backing up your gutters, and you're causing a lot of water to sit in the gutter and possibly just spill over the gutter. And if water is spilling over the gutter, then the gutter's really not doing its job. So two parts of this is keep your gutters clean. You're going to have granules in them. Just make sure you're cleaning them regularly. But if you see granules this amount, you know that your roof is aging really rapidly. And it's just basically like little pebbles. You can just dig your hand in it. So if you see that, you're having some age on your roof. The next one. Are there any more? Oh, okay.
That was it.
On those photos?
I don't see any questions coming in yet. I think we've got one.
We'll
how often should gutters be cleaned?
Depends on what you have around them. If you've got a lot of tree overhang, then I would clean them every few months. If you have a roof that's accessible, it's such an easy thing to do. Just to do it like you do every few months when you're cleaning out the garden. But if you have a really, really high roof, I know it's probably not as easy, and you're going to have to hire someone to do it. So I would at least do it at minimum once a year, because by the end, it's probably not going to be horrible by the end of the year. But if you've got a lot of overhang, you might want to do it twice a year, just, in the beginning of each season. As you can see at this property, we've got a lot of trees that are around the property. And so you can see all this debris on the roof. If we had gutters here, this would probably also be in the gutters. So just really looking around the property and seeing what kind of foliage you have, because the more foliage, the more the more often you're going to have to clean your gutters. As far as cleaning them from granule loss, that photo, they have not cleaned those gutters in years. You should never see that many granules in your gutters. So as far as granule loss goes, if you have granules in your gutters, you shouldn't be cleaning them all that often. It should just be like normal maintenance. Every time you clean them from leaves, a few of those will come out.
Great. Someone's asking if you have any gutter covering company recommendations, but can you talk a little bit about the concept of gutter covers Do you recommend them at all? How do they work?
Yeah, so there's like little covers that you can install just over your top of your gutter that will allow water to enter, but will prevent leaves and debris from getting in. It's a hit or miss. I don't love them. I mean, it definitely will help a bit, but those also catch debris. So a little twig will catch itself in one of those little openings, and then other stuff will collect itself on that branch. So or twig. So you're really gonna have to clean both of them. So you can either clean your gutters or you can clean your gutter guards. You probably won't have to do the gutter guards quite as often, but personally, I just don't see a ton of benefit from it. It's really just clean your gutters regularly. If you do install gutter guards, just know that doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention to it. You might just have to do it a little bit less often.
Great. So we have a couple of questions that all kind of go together. Someone's asking if gutters are necessary. They're sort of noting that they see a lot of houses that don't have them. Someone else is asking how you might, what the correct solution is if you don't have roof overhangs, I would assume, and that means, and also not gutters. This ties into another question that has come in about the HDLC and the Food Commission. So I think that obviously the answer to whether they're necessary and what you should do about them is going to tie into where you're located and if you're in a local historic district. So if you can talk a little bit about when it's appropriate to have gutters or and what you should do if you don't have the appropriate roof overhang or gutters in place, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so gutters aren't required, but I think that everybody should have them. We have enough problems with water here that it just is that one extra thing that will help divert water away from your house. And it also is very kind to put them because we live so close to our neighbors that if you don't have gutters, your water is going to be shooting right out at your neighbor's house. So it's really good for everybody to have them. You're really supposed to be in charge of managing the water on your property. So the city will, if you have a gutter issue with your neighbor and they're not doing anything about it, you could ask the city and they might step in. I'm not positive of that. It's probably not high on their list of things to do, but everybody's supposed to handle the water on their own property. As far as HDLC goes, they're getting really way more lenient with it. I know sometime in the past they've kind of struggled with it because they really want to stick to historic materials and stick to what the house originally had. But now they know that we need gutters on these houses. It helps the house in the long run to have the gutters. So they're really flexible with it. Sometimes they're picky about what type of gutter you have. So sometimes they want kind of the older it's basically like a U shape. It's a half round gutter. Those are a little more expensive, but they meet historic guidelines. I don't know when they decide that that's a requirement or not, because the past few times I've called them, they've said it doesn't matter, just put the gutters on. So they're pretty flexible with what type of gutter you have. So I would call them before you do it and just say, hey, this is my address. Do you have a preference of what kind of gutters I have? And usually the person at the front desk can put it in the system and then tell you on the spot. So it's super easy. Just check before you do it. The only thing I would recommend is don't put plastic gutters. It's cheap and people think it's a quick fix, but they fall apart really fast, and it's better to invest in a metal material because it will last longer. So it's cheap in the short run, but more expensive in the long run if you install plastic gutters. And then the other question I think somebody had was, what do you do if you don't have a big overhang? I would talk to a contractor about what you have specific to your property. I still think that gutters are important. So even if you don't have an overhang, if you have proper flashing, I still think that a gutter would do the trick. They might also be able to create some sort of an eave extension for you. I'm not sure exactly how that would look or how extensive it would be. If they'd have to pull up the first few rows of shingles and do something structurally. but it's definitely something to look into. You know, even if you don't have an overhang, it's still probably a good idea to install gutters there, especially because you're more likely to have water running straight down your wall. So that gutter will catch a lot of that water. But yeah, you might need to add some extra long flashing or something just to like kind of protect that edge. That would be my first thought. Is there any other questions with that I missed? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. We do have one more question about gutters and sort of how you route the downspouts to add drainage when you're on a narrow lot.
Okay. So it's kind of funny. It's like the idea is keep it away from your property, but sometimes that might mean you're just shooting it to your neighbor. The best situation would be to add some sort of extensions that divert it towards the street. That's where you really want to send the water so that those main drains hopefully can absorb it. And so extensions would be good. And the other thing you could do is add like a French drain right along the edge of your property line, so that what you're doing is the rain's coming through the gutter, down the downspout, and then the downspout's shooting it to the French drain. And the French drain is supposed to be shooting it to the street. That'd probably be, those are like kind of the two options. French drain is definitely prettier and more historic. But if that's not financially feasible, then extensions should help for sure. I've often see a lot of homeowners who maybe them and their neighbor both have their sidewalks sloped away from their property. So they almost create like a V, and then they have like a shared French drain. And that's a good option too, because then both of you are kind of working together to divert the water away from the house, but to the street rather than forcing it into the other property. That makes sense?
Yep, I think that's good. And that seems to be everything on roofs for now.
Cool. All right, so two more things I'm going to talk about with roofs while I'm up here. I already showed you guys the debris on this one. But on this property, you can kind of see right here how this dips, and there's a lot of debris sitting right in here. This is all rotted out. So if you look underneath here, this is the sheathing that is underneath the shingles, and it's totally rotted out right there. So you probably have had this debris sitting here a lot and nobody's cleaning it. And so then what happens is the water sits here and it becomes heavy, and then it finds its way through this shingle. You know, the idea of a sloped roof is to shed the water off the roof. It can't really handle accumulated water. So as soon as you have anywhere for the water to sit, it's going to find its way through the cracks and crevices, and then cause that rot underneath. And now that you have the rot that's underneath there, you really are in a losing battle at that point, because now you can't remove this belly. So you're going to have to pull these shingles up, probably a few rows, see how deep it goes, see how far up the roof it goes, and then replace that sheathing, and then redo the shingles. So one thing I wanted to touch on that I didn't touch on last time was roof sheathing. In historic homes, most historic houses had probably like slate tiles, and slate roofing tiles. They didn't need a continuous sheathing. They didn't need a continuous fastener. So what you have is plank sheathing. So plank sheathing basically are strips of wood along your rafters, and then the slate was attached to that sheathing. In new construction or in new roofing systems, when you have asphalt shingles, they need a continuous sheathing. So they can't just be tacked right on top of that plank sheathing. They need something that doesn't have any gaps in it. So oftentimes in historic homes, you'll get up in the attic and you'll see that it has plank sheathing and then plywood over top of it. Well, that's a great situation, because that plywood is resting on top of all of that other sheathing, and then your shingles have something to nail into. What you don't want to see is that plank sheathing, and then you poke your screwdriver through the openings, and you feel the asphalt shingles. That means that there's a lot of gaps so that the shingles can't fasten into the sheathing. So always make sure that if you have historic plank sheathing, you want to have plywood over top of it before you install asphalt shingles. And I think that's it for this part.
So I want to just interject. Someone from the HDLC is on here, and I should have said this earlier, but they wanted us to remind people that half round and K style gutters are allowed in historic districts, but they do require a certificate of appropriateness in full control districts, which goes back to, Amelia, you were saying exactly the right thing. Always ask for permission rather than forgiveness. They will tell you what you can and can't do and what's the best thing to do on your property. As much as they're a regulatory body, they're also a resource. They know the right thing to do on your property. So call them first and they'll tell you what's the right thing to do. Yep,
definitely. And yeah, they're great about it. So it's a super easy thing to do. Just ask. Okay, I think that's about it. So I'm going to pause this for a sec, and we're going to touch on the exterior.
Great, thank you. Amelia is just going to get herself safely where she needs to be on the ground for the next part of this, so we can talk about foundations. So I'm glad you guys are all asking so many really good questions. And as you have these questions coming in, please do keep asking them. They're super helpful. And I was really glad that Yvette with the HDLC was able to sort of chime in on that. That's the other thing. If you guys have comments that you want to make, oh, that happened on my house, and this is what I did, I'll call out some of that as it seems appropriate. We don't necessarily make recommendations for specific businesses or contractors, but we want this class to be a resource. So anything that you've got to add, or if you want to chime in, please feel free to do so.
Cool. I am going to just start at the front and kind of work my way back. I'm going to touch on cladding. I'm not going to go crazy into it because Bill is going to touch on it next week, and he's going to go really in depth with this topic specifically. I'll show you. So we've got this cute little house. When I'm looking at this material, I know that this is wood. It is softer, so when you knock on it, you can kind of hear it's got a little bit of hollowness. A lot of times, to figure out if you have wood or hardy board, which hardy board is a newer material. Hardy is more cement-like, so when you knock on it, it's hard as a rock. The other indicator is that there's rot, so that tells me this is wood. This is some rotting wood. As you can see, it's kind of becoming loose, and I can see a lot of ripples in the paint. So this is some siding that needs to be repaired and replaced. It doesn't all need to be replaced, but you can kind of patch it here and there. So instead of replacing maybe a whole section of wood, you could just kind of cut out certain sections and then just patch it as needed. So when you have wood cladding, the biggest thing is to just keep it sealed all the time. This is a butt joint. So basically 2 pieces meeting together. This is what I was talking about in that other photo earlier on the roof, where you see multiple butt joints were together. You want to see them over, you don't want to see them overlapping like that. So you want to see how this butt joint's over here and that one's over here. That's good. You don't want them over top of each other. So always make sure they're staggered. The other thing is you always want to keep the butt joint sealed nice and tight, but you really don't want to seal the underside. A lot of people do it. It's in this case, you can see it's been done, but you really want to have somewhere for water to escape if it gets in the wall. So if water gets in the wall and there's nowhere for it to go, then it's just going to sit and rot out your siding. That's probably why we're seeing so much rot on this house, is because it wasn't sealed properly. So always seal your butt joints. Always seal any openings around windows and doors, making sure any penetrations have seal around it, but don't seal the underside. Let's see. Another thing I wanted to touch on was soffits. So soffits are material that you can see right here is what you see behind your gutters. I mean, fascia. So fascia is right behind the gutters. You always want to make sure your fascia is intact because that's what your gutters are supported by. So as soon as that starts to rot, your gutters are going to start to go. You can see at this neighboring house, they don't have a fascia. So they basically, you can see their rafter tails all throughout. This one does have fascia. So you really do want to have that intact so that your gutters are nice and secured. Let's see. Another thing I wanted to point out at this house, you can see this is like the original shotgun. So this is all older wood. And then this looks like it's probably addition. And they put hardy siding on here. So this is that stuff that's kind of rock solid. You still have to kind of seal it the same way you would wood. You know, keep your butt joint sealed. You don't need to seal under here. Keep any openings around your openings sealed. This looks like it's been cracked, so securing it so it's not loose and then just sealing it. Another thing I'm noticing at this property is that there's a lot of algae buildup right along here. And this tells me that this area probably doesn't get much sunlight and it doesn't dry out very well. So gutters would be a great thing for this side of the house. At the very least, you should have gutters throughout, but this side in particular, because you can see it just can't really handle the water. This is another, it's a good day to do this actually, because it poured this morning. So we're able to see kind of where water goes on the property. When it's raining like crazy and you're sitting inside, peek out your windows and check out your lot, see where the water's going, because it's a really good time to figure out whether you have proper grading or drainage. So I can see that this area has totally dried out. It's graded properly. It's shedding away from the house. And then I kind of look and I say, well, where is it ponded? Where is it stained? This area, you can see it probably holds water. So it's just sitting right around here. You really don't want that. So this would be an area of improvement, talking to somebody about regrading or adding some sort of a subsurface drain just to prevent water from sitting right around the foundation. As you can see, this whole area is right by this corner foundation. So you really want to keep the water away. And in this area too, you can even see the line of where the water drips off the roof, and now it's just created algae buildup. So this whole thing kind of slopes towards the house. And so I can see that all underneath this foundation area, it's really, really wet. You don't want that. So gutters would be a huge improvement. And then I would kind of monitor it. And if it's still not better, then look at maybe doing some landscaping improvements. The other thing I look at too is the piers along the house. You can see this has a lot of algae buildup because it's damp. With a lot of brick piers, you'll see that they've got even just like ferns growing out of them. It's cute, it's like, I know there's a lot of like vegetation growing out of houses in the French Quarter, but it's bad for your building. And it tells you that there's active moisture all the time. So keep your property draining properly, and make sure that your piers don't have life growing on them.
Amelia, we do have another class about landscaping and vegetation. Sorry, another question. Someone wants to talk about about decorative plantings that you might put along the side of your house, and if you have any insight into how far from the house plants should be placed.
I would just say rule of thumb, make sure they're not touching it. That's probably the biggest thing. I've seen a lot of houses that have vegetation really close to the building, but maybe not touching it, but it's so tall and high that everything below it gets no sunlight. So when water gets back there, and when you're watering, and you're watering your garden or you've got a sprinkler system, now everything that's behind the bush can't dry out. So then you do kind of create an issue with that. So maybe being conscious of keeping it away as far as, it's not touching it. And then making sure it doesn't get super duper high. You still want, your building to be able to dry out if it does get wet. Cool.
Great, thank you.
Okay, here's something I was going to touch on. So we've got an AC system back here. I wanted to comment on the basically, so you've got your water heater is right here behind this, in this enclosure. You got your AC compressor, and then you've got this platform that is totally rotting out. So you can see that it's rotting out through the post, and this whole thing is really wobbly. You can also see that it's supported at the front and it's secured to the house in the back. So I would not trust that. You want to make sure you can see how wet it all is back there. It's rotting out, which means that that's probably going to pull away from the house at some point. You're basically trusting that those few nails aren't going to rust out. I always prefer for it to be secure to the ground. If you're going to secure to your house, you have to make sure you use like proper structural lag bolts that are just extra strong. Now, this is something to just be really conscious of when you are a homeowner. People always think about maintaining their ACs, but they don't always think about maintaining what their AC is sitting on. So this goes for AC platforms on the ground and on the roofs, especially. If that rots out, then your whole system falls to the ground, and then you have a bigger issue on your hands. So when you install a new AC platform, make sure that if it's attached to the house, make sure it's secured properly, make sure it's flashed properly. If it's on the roof, make sure it's installed properly as well. And then the other good thing you can do with it is just seal it up. So paint it or stain it and seal it before you put the AC on top of it, because that paint will just help it to last at least a few more years. So yeah, I want to touch on that as well. Do you have any questions about AC platforms? It's a thrilling topic.
I don't see any questions about that. Sorry, I actually missed a couple of questions just to go back for a second to some of the things that you were talking about before with the siding. Someone wanted you to clarify if you seal the underside, you said you don't seal the underside of the wood siding, or you don't seal the underside of hardy siding. Can you just repeat that for them?
I would just don't do both. So you always want it to be open underneath. You basically don't want anywhere for water to get trapped. So always seal the penetration openings, seal the underside of it. It's also just you don't need to do it. So why waste the extra money on the caulk and the labor?
Great. And then someone else wanted to ask what you do if you see algae growing on your walls.
I mean, the first thing I would do is just power wash it off. Make sure you clean it regularly, because algae, it's kind of like I was saying with that roof, is now that you have the hole, water's going to sit in it more. So it's going to continue to create a bigger and bigger issue. When algae just sits on the wall, that can hold more moisture. So it'll just continue to grow. And so you really want to just keep it clean, prevent it from being on there at all. So yeah, first step I would say is clean it, whether you're scrubbing it or power washing it, and then figure out how can I improve the situation. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're so close to the house next door that there's just no sunlight. So you can't help it to dry out. The best situation in that case is to prevent it from getting wet in the first place. So making sure your neighbors have gutters and making sure you have gutters. And also think about when you don't have gutters and you've got water falling, it's splashing up. So like the rain we had last night and today, water's pouring down here and it's splashing up, and that's why you're seeing it all along the base before you get up here. This is all probably wet because this is dripping, and you have some driving rain dripping, but you can see it's consistent all the way along the base. So yeah, pretty much just gutters are the best. Cleaning gutters are the best bet.
I want to add a quick thing about pressure washing your house. a lot of our older houses obviously might have lead paint. Even if you've had the house painted, it might just be concealed or encapsulated. So just be aware of that. There are guidelines to the pressure that you should use when you do something like that. So again, check with the city, check with safety and permits, check with the HDLC. You're able to find out a lot about that type of thing. Just be aware that your house may have lead paint somewhere on it if it's of that age.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yes, be careful with that.
So someone is asking if you already have sealant along the underside of the weatherboards, would it be better to remove it? And I would like you to answer this question if you want to. I also want to just sort of note that this is the type of nuance that we're definitely going to be getting into at next week's class, where we're really going to talk about how to deal with the exterior cladding and the siding on your house and how you prevent moisture buildup with that. So feel free to touch on that, but we're going to do a deep dive into that topic. And next week's presenter is sort of an expert on the materials that you would use in these types of situations.
Yeah. Bill's going to really go into depth with that. And Bill is also super knowledgeable about different types of caulk. So he's going to dive right into that. But I would say the first thing I would do is try to cut it, just with an X-Acto knife, even just creating some sort of opening. Just basically breaking that caulk seal just to allow any moisture to come out. That would be probably the first thing I'd do. I don't want to tell you to go removing all of your siding, but even if you can just create some way, water wants to get out. So if you create a hole, it's going to find its way out. So yeah, that would be the first thing.
Bill is chiming in, only remove it if there's a visible problem. So I think that's that between those two answers, it's not, sometimes there's best practice and they're sort of working with a building that's been modified over time, and the answer is somewhere in between.
Yeah. And if you maintain your house perfectly and you don't get water behind there at all, then again, you're not going to see a problem. But just as an inspector, I see that there's just so many ways for water to get in. And unless you keep on everything, I like to just allow things to kind of breathe. But so yeah, exactly. For this situation where I see already a lot of rot, that's probably something that I would consider because you already are seeing an issue. One thing I also want to talk about is porches, because I've seen some issues recently that have been popping up. So when you have a porch on your house, a couple things, you always want to keep it sloped away from the property. It's kind of like I say with your driveway or your sidewalk. It's just sloping it away, keeping the water away. When driving rain comes on it, you want it to find its way off. You can see at this property, there's a little bit of ponding water, right here. And I can kind of see that this whole porch looks like it's not really sloped anywhere. It's just flat, which is not great. You really want it to slope away from the house. I have a lot of people who don't know that, and they say, well, why is my porch leaning? And you want that. So don't be afraid of the porch leaning away from the property. So sloping your porch away. And then the other thing when you have a lot of concrete porches, oftentimes they were built on top of original wood porches. So if you have an old historic home and a concrete porch, something I'm always going to recommend, and your inspector should find this, but you can pop your head underneath the house and just look under the porch. You want to make sure that all the old wood has been pulled out. So a lot of times they would just use the wood porch as a form board. So they would just pour concrete right on top of it and then just let the old wood be. Over time, it's going to start to rot. It's going to start to fall. And then you're going to create a lot of wood soil contact. So basically you're just creating a highway where the wood is still partially attached to the concrete and then it's sitting on the ground. And now you've got a highway for termites to run right up. So that's kind of an easy thing that a homeowner can do if you have time, which we all have a lot of right now, is crawl under your house, look under your porch. If you've got a lot of old wood under there, get it out. It's not necessary. It just was left there. So that's something I always say during inspections is just remove all the old original wood underneath the concrete porch. Another thing I will mention, I've seen this a couple times recently, is I've seen people start putting wood on top of concrete porches. So it's flipping back the other way where now wood is trendy again. You don't want to just slap your wood right on top of your concrete porch. You want your wood to be able to breathe. So tongue and groove wood flooring, it shouldn't have anything directly underneath it, because if water gets between those tongues, between those open seams, you want it to be able to drain out under the house, and then your wood dries out. If you just slap it right on top of concrete, when it gets poured and rained on, water can't, it just sits on top of that concrete. Now, in a perfect world, yes, it's soaked away, so it should trickle out and find its way, but you're really just, you're creating a problem in that situation. There's not enough airflow. So after a few years of that, your wood's going to start to rot out. So, be conscious of that. Don't put wood over concrete porches. I saw that on new construction recently where somebody had done that. So from the front, it looks like a beautiful wood porch, and then when you crawl underneath it, it's concrete. So you really don't want that to happen. Do you have any questions that are from the past?
We're pretty good on questions. We do have a question I've been holding sort of about foundations. So I think that's what you're getting to next. So I was holding that question, but I'll ask it once we sort of get through some of that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna like briefly touch on foundations right now, and we're gonna talk about doing like a separate class specifically on it. Just it's really hard to see. So I'm gonna kind of scout out a property that maybe is easier to see the foundation. But at this property, let's see, and I don't want to lose service under here. This is a typical property where it's a single shotgun. So you have a whole row of piers, like right along here. Are you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Kind of breaking up a little bit. So go slow in case it sort of goes out a little bit.
Piers along here, and then you have a set of piers on the outside wall. In this house, for some reason, somebody did a whole set of piers on the middle wall. You don't really need that. It's just extra support. But so one
we're kind of losing you, Amelia.
thing I do when I install foundations is, okay, a couple things. So if you want to crawl into your house and just see what you got, first thing you want to do is figure out what kind of material you have. So do you have masonry block piers or do you have brick piers? This house has masonry block. So this is a bit newer. So it's an old house. They probably replaced the piers at some point. With masonry block piers, one thing you want to keep an eye out for is make sure that there's no cracking. With brick piers, you want to make sure there's no cracking, but you also need to keep an eye out for mortar deterioration. So in between the bricks, you have that mortar joint. You want to make sure that's not deteriorated too badly. And then you also want to make sure there's no loose bricks. So you want to check your brick piers and your masonry block piers if you have them. The other thing you want to check for is the wood framing. So you've got, basically a whole floor structure underneath. You've got wood sills, which are the exterior wall framing. And then you've got your joists that basically run between the sills and then support your floor system. When I go through, I start on one side of the house. I usually go right side, and then I go all the way around the house and back to the front. And I look at every sill and I look at every joist and every pier. I just scan the whole joist, and you look for rot, you look for cracks, you look for insect damage. And another good thing to have with you is a probe. So a screwdriver, they sell really long ones at Home Depot too, which I use the long ones. And you basically just want to stab. So if you see any sort of damage, whether it be moisture or insect, just stab it. And then if you can go through it, you have a problem. So that's kind of how I, go through the foundation. I don't know how to go too in depth with it without crawling under there, but do you guys have any?
Yeah, so this specific question, I've sort of been holding it because I think that there's a tie-in here. They really asked it back when we were talking about water intrusion. So this person is wondering if they think that there's water entering their property somewhere, and also their house is clearly moving or sinking, sort of how much movement on a foundation is okay. So they're asking sort of one question about if the water coming into their house is what's causing the movement, but also that can be caused by lots of different things. So how much shifting is acceptable, and when do you know if you need to call in a professional?
So houses should settle their most within for the first 5 years. That's when you're going to see normal settlement. It's kind of just wiggling its way into the ground and it's found its spot. And you really shouldn't worry about it anymore. If you have active movement, you should probably address it. So if you have a really, really old house and it's got sloped floors and it's got wonky windows, but you've had all new drywall and you don't see any cracking, then I think you're good. If you see a lot of cracking going on the interiors, then that probably means there's some active movement. Or if you maybe think it's just older, you could seal it up and then just keep an eye on it. And if a few months later it opens back up, then you probably do have some active movement. That's my first recommendation for like a DIY, check to see if it's moving. But as far as, moisture, the more moisture you have around your piers, the more they're going to be able to settle. So, the soil gets soft. If the water can't escape and it stays really damp, then your piers are just going to start to wiggle and move. You might see them leaning. So leaning is a really good indicator of movement. Anything, slight leans aren't crazy, but anything excessive, definitely get it looked at. If you see consistent leaning with multiple piers, then you probably have a problem area. But the other thing is if you have mortar deterioration. So like I said, between those bricks, if that mortar is excessively deteriorated, like if you can stick your finger pretty deep in that joint, as that deteriorates, your bricks start to kind of compress into each other. So you can see movement just as simple as like very slow movement with your brick piers are kind of compressing. It's really hard to tell exactly what's going on until I see the property. But if you have water in an area, that's a huge cause of movement. Like I see so many houses where they're having structural movement and problems, but we can't figure out where the water's coming from. And then you find out that they have a sewer leak under the ground. And then that is just enough moisture to cause cracking somewhere. So moisture is the enemy. So definitely if you think it's related to the moisture, I would address the moisture issue and then see if the cracking continues to open up. Did they give any more details about like where they're seeing movement?
They didn't.
Okay.
They might chime in with that while we're waiting. So the person that asked that question, if you want to follow up with any more information, please feel free to. Yeah. There's another specific question. Someone has a home in Gentilly Terrace, and it seems that the porch is draining rainwater toward the house rather than the street currently. And they're wondering if you know anything, if you have any insight into how extensive the repairs would be to remedy that.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would get under the house and go right to where the porch meets the house. I see most structural damage is in that spot. That's like the connection, so you have, your porch is right here, and then right in that joint, if water gets in that joint, it's going to be hitting the front sill of the house. So that front sill, it supports this entire front wall. So I would first crawl under the house and see how that sill looks, stab at it, use your probe, poke around. If it's soft or if you're going through it, then you're going to have to at least replace the sill. So look to see what kind of sill damage you're going to have to deal with. And then if there's any structural movement with the bricks or piers in that area, you might have to address as well. But the biggest thing really is to just make sure that issue is halted. So address the porch, make sure water stops coming in first. That might mean you have to have somebody come out and like completely re-pour the porch. Another thing you could do if you just cannot do that right now is to try to install some sort of like a flashing, some sort of a seal to prevent water from running into that spot. That's kind of hard to do after the fact. something we always want people to do when they do new construction, but in a historic home, it's very rare to see. So look into adding flashing if you can't afford anything else right now. Otherwise, it's probably best to try to talk to a contractor about repouring that porch or sloping it differently if it's not concrete. Does that answer that?
I think that was great. Does anyone have any other questions? I don't see anything else coming in at the moment. Yeah, so if we've missed anything, please let us know. You can always ask us more questions. Feel free to email either one of us. My email is smohan, SMOHAN at prcno.org. Amelia has a PRC email. It's a Yates, Yates at prcno.org. We're happy to answer questions. We are, like I said, we're going to deep dive into some of the fixes on moisture intrusion next Wednesday with Bill Robinson. So please tune in for that. And if there are any other topics that you guys need help with that you would like to see us do classes on, please shoot me an email. Let me know. We are more than happy to explore all sorts of your different needs and questions regarding your historic house. So thank you everyone for being here. We really, really, really appreciate it. I thought we had talked about slate roofs. I'm seeing that come through. Amelia, can you tell us a little bit about maintenance on a slate roof and how you tell if there's damage? I apologize that I missed that, you guys.
No worries. Yeah, so one thing, I'm not an expert on slate roofs. It's kind of a different beast. So I would first, if you have a slate roof house, get in good with a contractor. Just find somebody that you like to work with, because they're going to be your go-to person. But the first indicators of damage are cracked slates, slipping slates. So the slate is an incredible product. It's really durable, but the fasteners are what go first. So, you've got these little metal nails that basically fasten it to the roof. Those are going to rust out and become damaged before the roof does. So you're never going to see the whole slate just shot. You're going to see certain, slate slipping here and there. Don't ever walk on it. Always get a professional up there because it will crack as you walk on it. But yeah, I would, kind of take a step back and see, is it slipping? Do you see cracked sections? And those are the first things that I would say. If you see those, definitely get a contractor out to make those roofs. It lasts a really long time. It's just a little more expensive to maintain.
Amelia, would the same concept of not walking on it apply to a terracotta roof?
Yes. Don't ever walk on terracotta or slate. Leave that to the professional. Like we, as inspectors, that's a limitation we use. We're not allowed to walk on it. So if you ever have a house that you get an inspection on, I would always, if you have a slate roof or a terracotta roof, I would recommend getting a separate roof inspection just so they can get really in depth with exactly the condition of it, because they're able to see the condition. But it's pretty much just paying attention to the fasteners, mechanical damage, like cracked pieces, slipping, and then making sure the flashings are intact. Oftentimes with those types of roofs, you see the flashing exposed, and just checking on it, making sure it's not rusted out or anything.
We have a couple more questions coming in. I know it's 3:00, but if you can answer just a couple more questions, I think people's sort of memories are getting jogged. Once I said it was time to end, everyone was like, oh, wait, I have more questions.
No worries.
So someone's asking if their wood floors are separating and buckling, and this is not about exteriors, but while we're here, we might as well answer it. If wood floors are separating, buckling, how do you find the cause?
First, I would say, figure out, is it pervasive? Is it in a certain area? Really inspecting and taking care of your house is like just detective work and figuring out, like, okay, look at the big picture. Is it in every room or is it in one spot? And then the other thing I would look at is going under the house. If it's on your floors on the first floor of your house, look under your house. A huge issue that we find with buckling floors is insulation. So people put insulation under these, houses in New Orleans, and if they don't do it properly, you can cause a lot of moisture issues. These old wood houses, they were supposed to breathe, and the wood floors were supposed to breathe. And as soon as you create a seal there, you can cause a bigger issue. I think we're going to dive into that down the line in like a month or a couple weeks and talk specifically about insulation. So that would be a really good class to tune into, because we have these old houses and we want to improve efficiency, but sometimes we create bigger issues in doing that. But back to that specific one, yeah, check for insulation. If you have insulation, that's probably the problem. Otherwise, check for plumbing leaks. Maybe run your water in your house and then just peek under the house and see if you see any leaks. Maybe crawl all the way under and see if the subfloor is wet. Those are kind of the first things I would do if I saw some buckling. You could also get a moisture meter from Home Depot and poke it into the floor or put it on the floor, and it'll tell you the meter reading. And then you can just put it in different spots throughout your house and see how the moisture elevation changes.
That's great. Thank you, Amelia. Does anyone have any last questions before we say goodbye for the day? All right, I think that is it. Amelia, thank you so much for doing this again. We really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing from you guys with any other questions you might have. And hopefully we will see you at next week's class to learn a little bit more. All right, thanks, Amelia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.